Good morning. Well, ah, what a night last night was, eh? There's Rocky. Yeah, there he is. I don't know what you're seeing right now, so I'm moving the camera around so you might get a glimpse of him down there at the end of the bed. I feel like I've been hit by a truck. I really do. I would sooner go to jail for a year than be a salesman for a week. I hate selling. I just hate it, and this is the reason. Because of all you got to deal with people. You got to deal with people. Anyway, the guy did send me a message apologizing for not showing up, and he had a bunch of his things. I forgot we had an engagement. He said I didn't have my watch. I didn't have my phone. Something happened. Anyway, I don't know. He never said anything though about actually buying the thing. So anyway, I'm thinking he just lost interest in it and didn't have the consideration to let me know. That happens with people. And of course, I'm very cynical when it comes to people anyway. Look at this cat. Hey, get your nose out of my food. You know better. I'll share with you, though, okay? Let me have the first bite, though, because it's my sandwich. It's my sandwich. It is. Okay. I'm gonna bust a piece of ham off for you. I'm busting them off a piece of ham. Look. Eat that and tell me what you think of it. There's some cheese to go with your ham. Anyway, these are good sandwiches. There you go. There's another piece of cheese for you. Yeah. So, I'll go back to add it today. Burnt a lot of gas yesterday for no reason. It's already costing me money to sell this stuff because of people being the way they are. I burnt about $30 worth of gas so far, trying to keep my word to people who don't keep their word to me. That's basically it. When when I worked for the auctioneer, he tried to get me into sales for a while. And I told him, I said, it's a bad idea. I'm not a salesman. He said, anybody can sell. And I said, no, they can't. Sales is a talent like anything else. You either have it or you don't. Nope, anybody can sell. So, for a week or two, I can't remember, I think it might have been 2 weeks, I don't know, I was a salesman. Didn't want to be. Hated every friggin' minute of it. Was in trouble constantly. My boss, who told me that anybody can sell, was just constantly ripping a strip off me because I lost that sale or this sale on him, or because I got tricked by some con artist and ended up giving something away, pretty much, or whatever. Or I wasted a bunch of time accommodating somebody and still didn't get the sale or whatever. Well, at the end of 2 weeks, he took me off sales and put me back on the job I was good at, which was basically maintaining the property and also And also, I would go on the jobs too, because I was good at determining what would sell. Look at this cat. Hey, there he is. I was also good at determining what would sell. I'm not good at selling stuff, but I know what has value and what will sell and all that. So I used to go on the trips when we clear estates and whatnot and go through the place and pull the items to get out of the that first, because that was what we called the order of removal. The money, which is what the good stuff was, went out of the place on the first day. The trash went out of the place on the last day. Because when you're clearing out buildings, either residential buildings or commercial buildings, That's you, Rocky. You don't know how many keys are floating around out there. You don't know who has access to all that stuff that you've just bought. Because what we were doing is we were buying estates. And we were buying, the stock and everything and equipment from failed businesses and whatnot. And so we go into a bankrupted store, basically, to a failed business, or to a home where say an elderly person had passed away, and their kids were living in Toronto or something and didn't want to deal with it, didn't want to spend a month at home trying to deal with it. So they'd basically give us the keys to the house, and in exchange for like $1,000, that's about what was paid, around $1,000, 900 to anywhere from $900 to $1,500. That's about all it would be paid. And we'd go in and we'd clear the place out, and that's how it goes, So I was good at knowing, because I know a little bit about antiques and stuff, and I seem to have a good sense of what will sell. I'm just not good at selling it. That's all. Anyway, after 2 weeks of being a salesman, he just said he'd never seen anything like it. He couldn't believe it. It was 2 weeks of him berating me, giving me shit because I screwed up being a salesman. But I did tell him from the start that I wasn't a salesman, to be fair. I did. I didn't want to be a salesman. I knew I was no good at it. And I did make an honest effort because my job depended on it, really. I mean, if I had to try to make an honest effort at it. That was the job I was assigned, so I had to try to do it. But I was just horrible at it. I don't think I've ever been. I lost a lot of jobs over the years because of poor health, and also because of incompetence. Just because I was absolutely no good at them. And I can honestly say that even so, I was never as bad at anything as I am at sales. I'm just horrible at it. So for me, this is an ordeal, This is an ordeal. I've had cars that I could have sold for hundreds of dollars, or even some cases thousands of dollars. And I just sent them to the scrapyard because I didn't want to deal with it. I didn't want to sell like that. That's how much I hate selling. So you can imagine what I'm going through right now trying to sell this stuff. And like I say, I kept putting it off because I knew it was going to be this way, and it's turned out that it has been this way. And hmm. Anyway, that's it. I don't know what else to say. Partly what happens too is like, so far these people have been from Perth for the most part, and I don't have a whole lot of luck dealing with people from Perth. Really, I have a bad reputation in Perth. At one time, I was probably the most hated man in Perth, and I'm not exaggerating when I say that. In a town of 6,000 people, I was probably the most hated. And I think what happens is, because I've had this happen a few times when I was going to buy things, I had this happen. After I moved into the house, I remember there was something I wanted to buy. I couldn't tell you if it was a snowblower or a lawnmower or what it was. But there was something I wanted to buy, and I found one on Facebook Marketplace, and I was supposed to go out and see it. Had an appointment to go out and see it. And about half an hour before I was to go out and see it, I got a message from the seller saying, don't bother coming out to see it. We're not going to show it to you, so don't bother coming out to see it. Just don't show up at our house. They given me the address already, and it was don't show up at our house, and we're not going to show it to you, so don't show up at our house. Well, that was weird, but I knew what had happened. What had happened there was they had been talking to a neighbor or somebody and said that they had somebody coming around to look at the thing, and they mentioned my name. And the neighbor probably said, "Oh shit, don't have him around. He's a bad guy. Don't have him around." I've heard of him. You don't want to be bothered with somebody like that. So I think that's what happened. I got blamed for a lot of things. I remember there was a Tim Hortons in Perth. One of the Tim Hortons places. If I went in there, I was always treated. It was palpable. The hostility that the women in there treated me with was palpable. Like they just always seemed like they were really, really pissed off when I go in there. And a friend of mine had a girlfriend that worked in there, and this girlfriend of his hated me with a passion. Didn't really know me, but just absolutely hated me. Was just really mean to me whenever I would go around there or whatever. And I asked him one time, I said, why is she like that? And he said, well, she works down there at that Tim Hortons, and those women down there, they sit at a table of the girls that work in there, and they gossip and everything, and they talk about everybody. And he said, they blame you for things. And he wouldn't elaborate any more than that, and it made me feel uncomfortable. And I know it made him feel uncomfortable, and so we just didn't talk about it anymore. But another time, I was doing gardening work for an older woman, and her granddaughter was there. And her granddaughter worked at that same Tim Hortons. And this couple showed up to visit the granddaughter. And they had a little girl with them, looked to be about 4 years old, maybe. They were, and the woman of the couple, I said hello to her, and she just barked at me. She said something really nasty to me. And anyway, I just kind of, oh, well, I shrugged my shoulders and continued on, you know. What I was doing, I was kind of used to people being that way with me. And so it was at the point where it was normal, you know. Anyway, that woman also worked at Tim Hortons with the granddaughter of this woman I was doing the gardening for. The little girl came over to where I was working. They were both standing in the backyard, and I was working back there. And the little girl came over and was asking me what I was doing, and I was showing her, you know, what I was doing there and explaining it to her a bit, you know. And she said, oh, I love gardens. I said, you do? And she said, oh, yes. She said, I have a garden at home, and I just love my garden. And I said, well, a garden is a pretty good thing. I said, you know, gives you pretty flowers, gives you food to eat. I said, a garden really is a wonderful thing. Well, we're having this conversation, and the mother is frantically calling her to come over. And when the girl came over, she told her, she said, you stay away from that man. And immediately the granddaughter of this older woman spoke up, and she says, why are you concerned about her being near him? And the woman says, I don't want him to hurt her. And anyway, the granddaughter, to her credit, she said he wouldn't do that. You know, but see, people had spread rumors about me that I was a pedophile. What had happened basically is, in my early 20s, I was being jumped. Well, in my teen years and in my early 20s, I was being jumped on the street constantly. I wasn't in good health because of the drugs that had been put through my system when I was 8 years old. That buggered me up in so many ways. You know, they put massive doses of different things into my system. They even gave me LSD a couple of times. Imagine giving an 8-year-old LSD, like, so they could see what would happen. It was an experiment. They even made films, black and white, these grainy black and white films of me high on LSD. I mean, 8 years old. This was 1976. This happened, and they gave me massive doses of haloperidol, which crippled me and gave me seizures and everything. I was temporarily crippled, and I had seizures. Lost the ability to speak and to know when I needed to use the toilet. Had to teach myself how to speak, and you know, it was horrible. Nobody helped me. In fact, I was punished. I was subjected to ridicule, public humiliation, and just punishment. You know, because I lost those abilities, and I had to train myself again, while being beaten and publicly humiliated. Anyway, this isn't a pity thing or anything. This is just to explain. This is the background that I come from. And so my health wasn't good. I was on my own at 15. I was working 4 to midnight in a factory and going to school in the daytime. So I was tired. I was basically just weak and sick and tired, and the predators on the street could see it. And so they'd come for me. And they'd jump me and they'd beat the living Jesus out of me. I got thrown over the hood of a Pontiac Parisienne one time, with a brand new Pontiac Parisienne. That's how long ago this was. They were still making new Pontiac Parisiennes. My glasses flew off, landed in the street, and got run over. A pair of side cutters I was carrying in my back pocket carved into my hip, actually tore my jeans and carved a big gouge into my hip by these two guys that threw me over the hood of the car. When I hit the front fender of the car as I went up over the hood, the side cutters, just the end of the side cutters, the sharp end of them come right in and gouged a big chunk out of my hip. Tore my jeans and gouged a big chunk out of my hip. Anyway, they started walking away laughing. I came down off the hood of that car. I actually grabbed, the old cars, they had the hideaway wipers, so the hood would come to an end before the windshield, and the wipers would be down in there. I actually grabbed onto that, and that's what kept me from flying out into the street with my glasses. If not for that, I would have went straight across the hood of that car and right out into traffic and been hit by a car. Like, basically, these two guys had tried to murder me. That's what it boiled down to. And I come down off the hood of that car and I yelled after them. I said, "Effing assholes." And when I did that, they turned around. And what did you say? I said, "You're effing assholes." And the one guy, his eyes narrowed and he said, "You better apologize to me or I'm going to effing beat your ass." Like that, Well, I was in no condition to fight after what had just happened, and there were two of them and one of me. So I apologized to him. And that really affected me, being made to apologize to this asshole, that did that for no reason. And then I had a few more years of that before, in my early 20s, I made up my mind that I wasn't going to take any more. And I may not be able to physically fight very well because I'm sick and I'm weak and, I have a lot of issues. But you don't have to be to win a fight. You just have to be prepared to be dirty. And so I started carrying weapons. And of course, if you bring a weapon into a fight, the chances that you kill your opponent are considerably higher. So I got myself into the frame of mind where I would sooner murder the other guy who's coming at me and go to prison for the rest of my life for it than take a beating from him. And I was in that frame of mind, and I still am. I would still murder another man before I'd take a beating from him. Like, if you're a man and you're coming after me to beat me up for no reason, I haven't done anything. There's no reason for it. You're just doing it because you think you can. In my mind, now, I'm prepared literally to take your life away from you rather than to even receive a black eye from you, or a bloody nose or whatever. And so that's the frame of mind I got into. And the thing is, predators know you can't bluff. So predators know if you're serious. And they knew I was serious. And there were a few incidents where weapons came out. And I even hurt the other guy a few times with these weapons. And so, and the police were involved. I've gone to jail over it. I have served time in jail for assaulting people with weapons. I never initiate it. And I actively avoid situations where it's likely to happen. I'll avoid people and places where I know I'm liable to meet up with people who would be inclined to to start a fight, basically. I don't go to bars. I just avoid certain people and places because I know how it's going to end. And I figure if I'm going to be prepared to take another person's life under that circumstance, then I have an obligation not to purposely put myself in a situation where the likelihood of that happening is increased. Anyway, I couldn't go to the police when these things would happen because the police were part of the problem. The police were beating me up on a regular basis too. They were hauling me out of cars and beating on me and everything. So I couldn't go to the police. Anyway, it ended up then the predators became frightened of me because basically I became meaner and crazier than they were. They were only prepared to beat me up. I was prepared literally to murder them. And so that's how it goes. I remember one time this guy was coming at me on the street and he was making threats and everything. Some guy I'd never seen before, but just he decided he was going to target me. And I looked him in the eye and I said, "Are you prepared to die today?" And he stopped. He got this confused look. He said, "What?" I said, "Are you prepared either to die today or to go to prison for the rest of your life for killing me?" Because I said, that's how this will end. Because I said, once the fight starts, my goal is going to be to murder you. So I said, your goal had better be to murder me if you're going to come out of this alive. But if you do that, you're going to prison for the rest of your life. Likewise for me, if I do that to you. I'm prepared to come away from this situation dead or as a federal prisoner. The question is, are you? I said, think about that before you start anything with me. And he just looked at me and he said, you're fucking crazy. I said, I don't want anything to do with you. You're fucking crazy. And he literally ran, turned and ran, you know. But see, the price I paid for that, though, was that these people, if they can't get you one way, they'll get you another way. So what they did is they started spreading dirty rumors about me. And one of them was that I'm a pedophile. And the reason they did this is because pedophiles are universally hated. Now, if they had went and said, I hate that guy because I went after him to beat him up for no good reason, just because I wanted to beat somebody up and I figured I could beat him up because I thought he was weak. And he scared the hell out of me. And I didn't do it. Well, people would say, well, what were you going after somebody looking to beat them up for when they hadn't done anything to you? Like, it'd be different if he was banging your wife or if he'd stolen from you or something like that. But you know, he was just some guy on the street and you decided to go after him. You know, like, what was that about? And they would incur judgment for their actions. But by saying that I'm a pedophile, they could say, well, people would say, oh, well, if he's a pedophile, I hate him too. Because, of course, pedophiles are universally hated. And then even though I had never molested a child, and even though I'd never shown any interest in molesting children, it didn't matter. My interest was always in adult females, except when I was a child, I'd get crushes on little girls and stuff. But that's normal when you're 6 and 8 and 10 and so on. You get crushes on little girls if you're a normal boy. But that's not pedophilia when you're a child yourself. But I mean, as an adult, I never had any interest in children that way. Anyway, it ended up that this was the accusation that was made. So I was labeled a pedophile. My car was vandalized. I had so many cars wrecked by vandals in Perth. And, you know, it was bad anyway. I'd be in a store and some woman would be in there with her kid. And I could see the looks on their faces, and they'd literally take the kid by the shoulders and shift the kid over to get them as far away from me as they could. And all the time, they wouldn't break eye contact with me. They'd be looking me in the eye with this look like, you just effing try it and see what happens, you know. And I'm just in there looking to buy something that I need in that store. You know, I'm not looking to do anything to your kid. I don't want to do anything to your kid. Like, I'm not interested in children. At least not like that, you know. I like children, you know, like when the little girl came over to talk to me, that was kind of nice. Um, but I certainly wasn't looking at her like she'd be somebody I'd want to be, you know. It wasn't like that. It was just a nice moment, you know, having a conversation with this kid about the garden, you know, that's all. Well, anyway, that's the story. Somebody made a comment on here that I sound like Herbert the Pervert from Family Guy. I didn't respond to it because I just have nothing positive to say about it. I mean, it's kind of a sore spot with me. So, you know. Anyway, that's it. This is what happens. So my reputation in Perth is really bad. People don't want me around because they think I'm a pedophile and because they think I'm crazy. But the thing is, if you leave me alone, I'm not crazy. It's only the ones who come after me looking to beat me up that I'm crazy with. I don't do things that would make me worthy of being beat up. I'm not stealing from, I don't steal. I don't be going around trying to seduce other men's wives or anything like that. There's virtually no reason why anybody should, no legitimate reason at least, why anybody should want to beat me up. And the truth is, look, if I saw a child being abused by somebody, if I saw somebody trying to abduct the child on the street or something like that, I'd be right in there putting a stop to it if I could, doing whatever I had to do to protect the child. I'm not a predator. I'm actually very protective of the innocent. I was an innocent, and I wasn't protected. When I was a child, I was not protected. You know, I was on my own. Right from a very early age. I was still a child, and I was on my own. Even before I was 15, even when I was still at home, I was pretty much on my own, you know. And so there was nobody coming to rescue me from anything. And so, you know, I suppose because of that, I've got a soft spot in my heart for the vulnerable. So I have a soft spot in my heart for elderly people who have lost their strength, you know, and I have a soft spot in my heart for children too. And for disabled people, for people who can't fight back, really. You know, because I know what that is, and I know what happens. I know how the predators come for people like that. Anyway, that's it. That's just an explanation from me. That's one of the reasons I won't go to geared to income housing. Because in geared to income housing, there's always a bunch of them in there that couldn't live anywhere else because of the way they are. And I can't deal with that. When I would visit geared to income housing, I'd have problems. My mother lived in a geared to income housing building. She still does. She's in Kingston now. The building she's in now is all seniors, so it's better. It's not like the one she was in Brockville. But in the city of Brockville, she lived there for years in geared to income. And some of the things that would happen in there. I had a guy coming after me all the time in there, insisting that I had to tell him why I was in the building. You know, I wouldn't. I'd just tell him to mind his own business. But that was one thing. We nearly came to blows a couple of times, me and that guy did, because he was quite aggressive. And in the end, I remember one time his drinking buddy actually had to pull him back into the apartment because I was getting ready to hurt him. You know, it was like, I've had enough of this. And he wanted to fight me. I told him, I said, this is the end of this. I'm not having this anymore. And I started to come toward him, and he started to come toward me, and his drinking buddy grabbed him and pulled him back into the apartment. you know. But anyway, that was one thing. How long would I last in that environment before I'd be in jail? You know. Another time, my mother's next door neighbor, who was a crackhead and completely insane, he actually kicked the glass out of his oven and out of his oven door, put his foot through it one time. He just tore his apartment apart. He'd be playing music so loud that my mother's pictures would be falling off her walls at like 2 and 3 o'clock in the morning and stuff. He was completely nuts, this guy. And somebody in the building had called the police on him, and he didn't know who. So he went up and down in the upstairs hallway where he lived. He lived next door to my mother, as I said. And he knocked on every door, and he asked, "Did you call the police on me?" They all said no. Now, one of them did, but they knew he was crazy, so they all said no. One time, a woman called the police on him, and she got her tires slashed. He slashed the tires on her car. He had a knife, and he'd carry a knife around and stuff. Anyway, the only person he hadn't asked yet was my mother, so in his simple mind, he thought she must be the one by process of elimination. She was guilty for calling the police on him. Never occurred to him that somebody may have lied to him. Anyway, she's putting the key in the lock to go into her apartment. He came out of his apartment, come up behind her, wrapped his arms around her and held her there, and he whispered in her ear, "If you ever call the police on me again, I will drag you into my apartment, I will sodomize you, and I will," he said, he didn't say sodomize, he said F up and then I will cut your throat. Well, she told me that story. I came to visit, and she told me that story. And I said, I'm going to go down to my car now, and I'm going to get the tire iron. And I'm going to come back in here, and I'm going to pay that asshole a visit. And I'm going to let him know that he made a huge mistake. I'm going to let him know in no uncertain terms that he made a huge mistake. And she said, please don't do that. Because she knew I would, And she said, please don't do that. You'll cause trouble. You'll cause trouble for me. I live here. I don't need that. Please don't do that. So I backed down and I didn't do it. But I wanted to. I wanted to kick in his door and go in there and just show him absolutely no mercy, work him over with a friggin' tire iron. And anybody who's seen a tire iron, especially the ones out of the old cars I used to drive, these things were heavy steel and they were about 3 feet long. I mean, these things were a weapon. You could kill somebody with a tire iron. And I was going to go in there and work him over with a tire iron. So you can imagine how long I would last in a geared to income building. That's why I don't go into geared to income buildings. I had friends in Perth. I had a friend in Perth who lived in one of those buildings, and I'd visit her sometimes. And I had run-ins with people there too. Crazy people, and people that would get up in my face and stuff. I had one guy that would stand on his balcony when I was coming into the building and threatened to shoot me. And one day I yelled up at him. I said, "You're going to shoot me." I said, "Show me the gun. Show me the gun you're going to shoot me with." And he pulled a pistol out. He had a pistol under his jacket, and he pulled it out and pointed it at me. So, I mean, this is the stuff you get into with these buildings, My mother did complain about the guy who made the threat against her next-door neighbor. After that happened, she did go to housing and complain about him. And she was told, if you don't like it, you can move. Because where's he going to go? Who's going to have him live in their building? So if you don't like it, you can move. That's what she was told. Yeah, if you don't like being assaulted, because that was an assault, you know, if you don't like being threatened that you're going to be sodomized and then have your throat cut, because after all, who wouldn't like that? What kind of a freak wouldn't enjoy that experience, you know? Well, then you can move. So apparently, to live in that building, it was a prerequisite that you enjoy being assaulted and threatened with sexual assault and death. You know. Anyway, by a crackhead. Anyway, that's the bottom line. That's why I can't go to Geared to Income. Plus, Geared to Income has like a 10-year waiting list. Anyway, and women are given a priority. If you're a single man, it's a 10-year waiting list, yes, but it isn't, because if you're a single man, what happens is your name keeps getting pushed back on the list because, you know, there'll be a woman who needs a place and she'll get priority. And I know this happens because I had a friend who was on the waiting list and his name came up to the top several times, you know, over the period of like 20 years. It came up, well, 2 or 3 times anyway. And each time he got pushed back down because there's some woman who needed emergency shelter. So she got priority. And this is what happens. So, again, for a man like me, it wouldn't be a 10-year waiting list. I'd be lucky if I ever got in. And I really wouldn't be lucky because I'd be going into the kind of a place where they have people I need to stay away from. So that's why I don't go to Geared to Income anyway. At least if I'm living in the back of the truck. If I don't like my neighbors that are parked beside me, I can move. I can literally start the truck up and drive it to another location, you know. And avoid controversy in doing so. Anyway, that's it. That's where we're at. There's Rocky. Quite a cat. I gotta get ready and go to work. I feel miserable right now, but I'm sure I'll feel better once I get moving and start doing something. I just need to get moving and start doing something. That's all. All right. We'll see you later. I hope you have a good day.